Which royal came within inches of dying? From secret cancers to the prince who lost consciousness in a polo accident, the royal family tried as hard as they could to hide these health issues. Buckingham Palace has gone to great lengths to keep royal family members' health issues relatively quiet, a practice that goes back at least as far as King George III.
History remembers him, above all, as the Mad King, or the King who lost America.
George III, for all he accomplished during his lifetime, is a prime example of a royal health crisis the palace simply couldn't cover up, no matter how hard it might have tried. In 1765, King George III developed a fever. Around that time, he was said to have shown signs of cognitive decline. The king came down with the same illness in 1788, this time experiencing manic episodes and undergoing a complete personality change. For the next few decades, George III suffered multiple mental health-related struggles. By the time he died in 1820, George III's subjects knew about his illness, which was later said to have been caused by a hereditary blood disease. Modern doctors and historians, however, theorize that the king had a mental illness, like bipolar disorder. When Queen Elizabeth II's father, King George VI, was diagnosed with lung cancer, the public was kept completely in the dark, and so was the monarch. The former king first started experiencing symptoms in 1951, and an X-ray revealed a significant mass in his left lung. The king's doctors recommended the entire lung be removed, and he agreed to the operation. The public, however, was told that the monarch was undergoing a procedure to remove, quote, structural abnormalities. A 2021 medical study published in Cardiovascular Pathology suggests that by the time the king's lung was removed, the cancer was no longer concentrated in just that area, but had already made its way into the right lung. The king, unaware of his fate, made what appeared to be a full recovery after the surgery, with the monarch and his subjects thinking he was as fit as a fiddle. His sudden death in 1952 was all the more shocking. Medical experts now believe that he might not have died from coronary thrombosis after all, but from complications of his lung cancer. While the world has taken some great strides when it comes to removing the stigma surrounding mental health, Princess Margaret did not live in an era where mental illness was normalized. Though the palace did acknowledge several of her health issues, it vehemently denied she was battling depression.
You know how I hate confrontation, or mess, or dereliction of duty.
For years, there were whispers about Margaret's mental health. In 1996, the Irish Times published an article about the princess's experiences with depression. It claimed that she was suicidal during the breakdown of her marriage with Anthony Armstrong Jones in the 1970s. A new biography of Queen Elizabeth II at the time suggested that Margaret's friends were very concerned about her mental health and that she'd had a nervous breakdown in 1974. In 2000, more reports about the princess's mental health surfaced, with claims that she was severely depressed. The palace, however, said that she was ill from having suffered a possible stroke. Royal biographer Andrew Morton believes that the palace did everything in its power to cover up Margaret's mental illness. In his book, Elizabeth and Margaret, The Intimate World of the Windsor Sisters, Morton doesn't mince his words, writing, "Let's face it, Margaret had depression, and in the royal family you are not allowed to be depressed. They lived in a world where illness was dealt with by going for a long walk, and mental illness was ignored." When Queen Elizabeth II spent a night in the hospital in 2021, Buckingham Palace wasn't very forthcoming. It appeared that the palace tried to hide her hospitalization, flying the royal standard flag high at Windsor Castle, even though she hadn't spent the night at home. Aides also told inquiring journalists that she was there. When the palace finally admitted that the Queen spent the night in hospital, the press was outraged. Royal correspondents and commentators quickly let the public know their thoughts on the matter, and BBC royal correspondent Nicholas Witchell didn't mince any words, suggesting that the institution had dealt a blow to the public and the press's confidence in them.
Actually, there's quite a lot of anger here in the UK at the idea that the palace may have intentionally misled the public.
Managing editor of Majesty magazine, Joe Little, agreed, saying, "The Queen does have a right to a certain degree of privacy, but on the other hand, she's head of state." What might be the biggest cover-up by Buckingham Palace in recent memory is that of Queen Elizabeth II's true health condition before she died. In his 2022 book, Elizabeth, An Intimate Portrait, Giles Brandreth, who was friends with both Prince Philip and the Queen, dropped a bombshell claiming that he'd been told that the late monarch had bone marrow cancer. He wrote, "It would explain her tiredness and weight loss and those mobility issues we were often told about during the last year or so of her life. This form of cancer," Brandreth explained, "does not have a cure. However, the symptoms can be managed with treatment. However, the Queen's former spokesperson, Dickie Arbiter, told Newsweek that Brandreth's information is secondhand and that he doubts anyone really knows what caused the Queen's death. The public still has no idea why the Queen was hospitalized in 2021, and perhaps this was the reason why. Since documents related to the royal family remain sealed for 100 years, maybe our grandchildren will know the truth one day. The institution sure likes its secrets. When Duchess Sophie of Edinburgh went into early labor with her daughter, Lady Louise Windsor, both of their lives were hanging in the balance. The Duchess suffered an acute placental abruption, a condition that can be fatal to both mom and baby. Sophie was taken to the hospital after experiencing severe pain and was rushed into the operating room for an emergency C-section. Louise, who was born with low birth weight, was transported to another hospital where she received specialized care.
The baby was born by emergency cesarean 4 weeks premature after her mother was rushed into hospital.
But the nightmare wasn't over just yet. To stay alive, Sophie needed multiple blood transfusions to make up for the several pints she'd lost because of internal bleeding. Speaking to OK magazine, royal correspondent Jenny Bond revealed that Louise spent 2 weeks in St. George Hospital's specialist neonatal intensive care unit after her birth. Sophie, on the other hand, had to wait before she could see her newborn. The Duchess couldn't be reunited with her child for 6 days because she was too ill to be transported. With all the drama, one would have expected the palace to fill in the public. Instead, its statement merely announced the baby's birth via an emergency C-section, and that the newborn had been taken to St. George's Hospital as a purely precautionary measure. Prince Philip dealt with his fair share of physical ailments before his death. Some were better known to the public than others, but when it came to his last days, the palace wasn't very forthcoming about how much the prince's health had declined. Philip's first significant health scare occurred when he was 90 years old and taken to the hospital after experiencing chest pains, which was later revealed to have been caused by a blocked coronary artery. In 2012, he dealt with a nasty bladder infection, and in 2018, he had to undergo hip surgery. In 2021, however, his health seemed to rapidly decline, with the prince making frequent hospital visits. In February 2021, the palace revealed that Philip had been hospitalized because he was feeling ill. A palace source told the BBC that there was nothing to worry about and that Philip was in good spirits and was set to spend a few days in the hospital for observation as a precautionary measure. Less than 2 months later, however, news broke that the Duke of Edinburgh had died. The palace released a statement announcing his death, informing the public that Philip had died peacefully this morning at Windsor Castle. The statement did not go into any details regarding the cause of his death, but it was later said that he died of old age. In 2001, the then Prince Charles was playing polo with his sons when the future monarch took a very bad fall, but that's not what the public was told in the aftermath. The palace, as usual, tried to play down the severity of the incident. ABC News' headline read, "Prince Charles takes a tumble." 5 years later, King Charles III revealed what really went down in an interview with NBC News, saying, "The pony came down sideways and I must have landed absolutely smack on my head." Prince Harry told me later that he thought when I was lying on the ground that he said, "Papa's just snoring," and there I was busily swallowing my tongue and quietly dying. In his memoir Spare, Harry also revealed that the king constantly deals with debilitating pain from his old polo injuries and has to do exercises to help him manage it. Of course, this is not something the public knew about until the prince decided to casually mention it in his book. In March 2020, both British Prime Minister Boris Johnson and King Charles III tested positive for COVID-19. It appears that one COVID infection was one too many for Buckingham Palace, so when Prince William caught it too, he remained mum. Months later, the public found out that he also had the virus and had dealt with some pretty severe symptoms.
A royal bombshell today. Prince William secretly battled coronavirus months ago.
A source told The Sun, William was hit pretty hard by the virus. It really knocked him for 6. At one stage, he was struggling to breathe, so obviously everyone around him was pretty panicked. At a royal engagement in November of that year, William told one of the attendees that he didn't share his diagnosis with the public at the time because he did not want to add stress to an already stressful situation. The source also said that the prince pretty much refused to stay in bed and insisted that he continue with his royal duties. He did a pretty good job of hiding his illness since no one suspected that he was even sick in April, until he shared the news 7 months later. During Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's tell-all interview with Oprah Winfrey in 2021, Meghan opened up about experiencing severe depression while she was pregnant with Prince Archie. When Winfrey asked Harry how he dealt with Meghan's depression, he answered honestly, saying that he was ashamed to take the matter up with his family. Harry then went on to explain that it still upset him that his family never publicly supported Meghan, especially when the tabloids were tearing her apart.
So to receive no help at all and to be told continuously, this is how it is. This is just how it is. We've all been through it.
In the end, of course, the palace's attempts to keep the public from finding out about Meghan's ailing mental health backfired. When King Charles III and Queen Consort Camilla took over the reins after Queen Elizabeth II's death, it sparked renewed interest in their health. Eagle-eyed fans noticed Camilla's hands shaking on more than one occasion. The first instance was during a speech she delivered at a reception for International Women's Day in 2022. One could not miss the tremors in her hands while she spoke. Royal watchers noticed the tremors in her hands, making an appearance again while she was on a royal tour in Kenya in 2023. Some health experts cited stress as a possible factor, but it could also be caused by a slew of other underlying illnesses. Then there's King Charles III's chronically swollen fingers, which were thrust into the spotlight during his coronation ceremony. A doctor told the Daily Mail that there are many underlying conditions that could be causing it, including bacterial infections, arthritis, and tuberculosis. As one would expect, the palace hasn't responded to the public's concerns.